Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
So we hit record right as we were joking about the last episode. I probably got a little typey, and you could maybe have heard some keyboard stuff because I don't remember what I was actually searching. But the joke is that, I'll search for a book and buy it in the middle of an episode, which is I think what I did with Microscope. So
yeah, I think that's what you did.
Yeah, and so yeah. I've purposefully put the microphone in front of the keyboard so that I won't purchase during an episode. Jason believes that probably won't last, and he's probably right.
And apropos to today's episode, let's be honest that sometimes making those types of purchases is slightly therapeutic for you.
Oh, that was a good lead-in. So, within the past week, 10 days or so, the Discovery episode, what was it, 3 or 4? I can't remember. Oh, shoot. Oh, well. But point being is that, well, that was a bad. Jason, edit that out. It was the episode where Tilly is having challenges being on the Discovery.
And as an officer.
Yeah. And we don't need to go to the ending and spoil or anything like that.
If you haven't been watching, though, you all should watch. I say this is a diehard Trekkie who is stuck with Discovery all the way through. Season 1, neat. Season 2, weird but better. Season 3, getting good. Season 4 is downright excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the latest episode, Tilly goes to talk to Dr. Culber and says that I'm struggling here. Yep. For whatever reason, obviously moving 900 and some years into the future, becoming an officer, everything seems to be moving fast. She asks in the prior episode if she can talk with him.
Yep.
So what is now at the time of this recording, the current episode, Tilly sits down and is talking to Dr. Culber, and it's
a beautiful scene.
It's therapy. And the same thing at the same time, you're seeing Dr. Culber conduct therapy with Book as well. So this was an episode that was obviously, I mean, it was focused on Wilson Cruz's character, who's phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite characters on the show.
Great actor, great character, finally getting his due as a character.
Yeah. I remember him on, was it My So-Called Life back in the early 90s with Claire Danes and all that. I think it was him that was the friend. So on the off chance that he's happening to listen, which is unlikely, he can correct us.
I mean, the chance of Wilson Cruz being one of our 3 listeners is pretty remote.
Yeah. But it was a phenomenal episode because it showed vulnerability. It showed, I don't know this. I'm going to put it as a layman. It showed that it's okay to look for help. There are some resolutions that come out of this. I think it was really a shining episode for Dr. Culber. And Jace, you have a background in this. I think it's apparent for anyone who's listened to us, in any group of episodes, that obviously you have a background in therapy, amongst other things, but you've conducted your share of it. What did the story mean? And I'm leaving the social media thing for you to mention, but how did you see that episode?
I was really impressed with it, Brad. I was really impressed. So like you said, I mean, we've talked a bit, at least tangentially, about our professional backgrounds, but I am a licensed psychologist, and I don't make my living practicing doing therapy. That's in my past, but I've done my fair share. And as a psychologist, as someone who has been interested in psychology, for a really long time, I've often watched Trek and other canons, other franchises, but I've often watched Trek, especially with an eye toward my science, toward my field. And and in part because Star Trek has always attempted to be fairly psychological, but also like you TNG and DS9, those are our things, right? Yours and mine, Brad. And you look at TNG and you look at the Enterprise D, right? No bloody A, B, C, or D. You look at the D, and it was a different kind of ship for a different time, and they had Counselor Troy. They had this actually rather diverse, gifted actor whose character was embarrassingly underwritten and underutilized, but no different than Dr. Crusher, right? Because misogyny, let's just call it what it is. And so you had these two women who should have been the most intelligent and were the most educated characters on this starship of elite people, and we saw them doing yoga. So I always was looking for more from Trek, but the fact that you had a ship's counselor, ignoring the fact that she wasn't Dr. Troy, even though she most certainly would have been, ignoring the fact that a lot of us don't call it counseling, not those of us in psychology per se, but at least it was there. But of course, or I shouldn't say of course, but I think of course, in TNG, they largely ignored the fact that Troy was a trained clinician and instead just relied on her Beta Z empathic skills. There were exceptions to that, right? There are a few episodes where she did some adequate therapy. You had real discussions, but then of course it invariably involves some other sentience or life form, and then she'd give you that look of horror, and then you cut away to a commercial. So there were 7 seasons of missed opportunity. Okay. I mean, Troy's best line of her entire character was in First Contact while intoxicated. "We don't have time to talk about time." Right. Great movie, great line. Yeah.
How should I know that? That's my favorite Star Trek movie, First Contact.
Because it's the second best ever made.
Yeah.
Right. But then we get to Discovery, and we get to the scene of psychotherapy between Dr. Culver and Tilly. I was just so impressed with it as not to toot my horn, but as a trained clinician who really never gets to see real psychology on TV or in the movies. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can only imagine what physicists and engineers go through watching something like Star Wars. Like, I know how bothered I was by the fact that in the sequels, which one was it, in episode 8, that the ships are all capable of hyperdrive, but the big ship can't catch up to the little ship while they're in real space. I mean, come on. But and then all the little shuttles just zoom away. Like, that's got to kill other scientists. But this is the first time I have ever seen what I thought was a legitimately good representation of meaningful therapy on TV. And naturally it was in Trek. And I was so impressed with that. I mean, everything from certainly there was stage setting because it's a television show. Well, streaming, so it's like a movie every week. But there was staging, like you'd never actually be across the room. That would be terrible therapy. But otherwise, the lighting, the tone of voice, the topics, just it was so beautifully done that I thought, I'm not a very outward facing guy, but obviously here we are together doing a podcast, and you've been getting me on Twitter. And so I'm learning to twit. And so I thought, I'm just going to post my compliments, right? Who am I? But I'm going to post my compliments because someone has to say something. So I put out a tweet just congratulating, complimenting Wilson Cruz and the writers of Star Trek Discovery, because it was just such a beautifully done scene. It's just a beautifully done scene. All right.
I would argue it's an episode, because we saw multiple scenes, not only with
you're right
with Culber, with Tilly. I think the deeper, more emotional scenes, and you can see it.
Yes.
Were between Culber and Book.
Yes. But as actual therapy,
Yeah.
The scene with Tilly took it.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
Yeah, and even at the end, books like, I don't remember the exact. I can't memorize that stuff anymore. But something to the effect of, "Do you have things that you need to talk about? Do you want to talk about anything?"
Yeah.
And Culber just, you could see he was very emotional. He said,
Because he's a good actor. Yeah.
Yeah, someday.
So, but especially that scene. So we put out this tweet. It's been, like you said, 10-ish days, about a week and a half. We really wanted to record this while it was fresh in mind. 9,400 views later. We still have occasionally people clicking on it. And so what Brad and I want to do is talk a bit about that tonight. Not the tweet, although Mr. Cruz, we really appreciate
he liked it. He liked it. He gave it a thumbs up.
Yeah, we appreciate we appreciate spreading the word, but we really appreciate the acknowledgement, because we just thought it was so beautifully done. The reality, though,
I was just going to say that it's only Twitter. Obviously, both of us are mature middle-aged men. We understand what Twitter is, but
to get someone, those three things are correct.
Yeah, well, for you, but but the fact that, I mean, he liked it. Obviously, it was a little bit like school kiddish when you saw something like that, just because
my 14-year-old thought that was incredible.
Yeah, and well, I'm not 14.
So did Brad.
Yeah, I thought so too. I'm emotionally about 16, but go ahead.
I put you easily in your early 20s, my friend. So,
okay, thank you.
So, but our point is not to talk about that, though we really appreciated that and thought that was great. What really, I think, has moved Brad and me is how many people have clicked on it. Star Trek has always been an attempt, always, to reflect its current time in history, real history. Sometimes it's done that better. Sometimes it hasn't done that as well. Season 4 of Discovery is absolutely an attempt. And they're clearly talking about issues related to the pandemic and whatnot. Brad and I, go ahead.
I keep jumping in, but
go.
You bring up a good point. So obviously Discovery has taken this idea of psychology and therapy. It's different than what I've seen in other episodes and such. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
I can relate as someone who has been through therapy, and there's nothing embarrassing or wrong with me saying that. But we're talking, like you just said, and that's what I wanted to point at, is there's a lot of people that looked at this tweet.
Right.
There's a lot of people independent of that. When we got out to Twitter, it was like an eye-opening experience for us. And so this makes it sound, obviously, as my kids say, boomers and geriatric. But we saw a population of people that weren't afraid to speak their mind.
Because they're hurting. And they want to be recognized, because it's what I see among my students. And at this point I've been using what you said, Brad, by the way, all over professionally and with friends. I've been telling everybody, one of my good friends has said about December, "Welcome to the 22nd month of 2020. I've used that a dozen times in the past 2 weeks, Brad, because it's yours. And every time people stop, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's true." And it doesn't matter if they're a professor or a student or someone else in my life. They're like, that's it. People are hurting. And and I see it in our work and in our communities.
Oh yeah. And we used to, back in the day, for those that are younger, we used to talk about before 9/11, post 9/11.
Right.
I don't think that whole, and that was awful. But my point is that I think we're going to be using pre-pandemic and post-pandemic for a long, long time, because it affected so many more people.
Literally everybody.
Yeah. And look at how analog gaming became so popular. D&D exploded, analog gaming exploded.
Right.
You can see that in social media.
Yep.
But the question I have for you, and this is not a softball one, this is curiosity. I'm not leading questions that I have the answers to. I'm kind of interviewing Jason away. What have you seen in terms of studies about how people have psychologically and emotionally reacted to what's been going on? Why do you think, is it just a matter that there's platforms now where they can show and express their hurt? or is it a function of the pandemic? Or, what are your thoughts? I'm just curious.
It's a great question. I'm not sure I have a mixed answer. There are pieces of it. Have I seen research on the emotional, psychological effects of the pandemic? Yes. As you can imagine, that research in the past, I'd say 9 to 12 months, 6 to 9 months has exploded. I mean, I just finished a really small study. I just finished a really small study, little statewide study with a couple of colleagues and half a dozen of my students, looking at college faculty and their experiences of the pandemic, right? And that's just, I've seen lots of snapshots like that. And my read on all of this is, no surprise, has what we call high face validity. People are stressed, and then life moving over to Zoom and other platforms like that. There's some really neat, not so much research as really good thinking about what are the benefits and especially the negatives about this type of interfacing, but more to your question of what about RPGs, because that's really what we're here to talk about today, of RPGs as therapy, if you will.
Bingo. Yeah, that's what I was kind of leading to.
Yep, and everybody, we're using, Brad and I are saying RPGs as therapy in a very, very generic, not really way, right? I mean, disclaimer, nothing we're talking about is therapy. I'm not offering it. Brad's not offering it. And when we say RPGs as therapy or as counseling, we're being really colloquial, right? RPGs, sitting at the table, as an opportunity to feel better. And if not heal, at least not hurt for a while. I haven't seen any research on this. I strongly suspect there isn't any, but I think we've both either read and or watched a lot of commentary about how important this is. And, a bunch of the outlets like where you normally go for your RPG news, the New York Times, the Atlantic, right? All of those slummy gamer outlets, right? They have had for the past several years occasional articles on just the popularity of gaming, of tabletop gaming. But I think in the past year or so, there has been more of this, because here's my hunch, Brad. I think that gaming was already, RPGing was already well on its way toward being more welcoming and inclusive. And that meant that more people could feel more safe and maybe hurt a little less by engaging with these games and with one another. And then we had the pandemic. And for many people, they were already brought into the gaming fold, and there was some salve. And others, well, we know what happened. Others, many others, especially with D&D, have gotten into it, right? The marketing shows us that. And the fact, I just listened to a podcast, an interview yesterday about where the interviewee was asked about this, and he said, his understanding is that most of the growth is in the younger generations, like the teens, the 20s, maybe the 30s, not the older. And so I think it's kind of like any really complex situation. There are multiple inputs. I think we already had a rising popularity of tabletop gaming. I think we had easier access. I think we had more ready inclusivity, and really, and we said this before, you and me, but I want to reiterate it here. I really think Wizards, without question, have stood out at the forefront of welcoming everyone to the table. I mean, yes, it's woven into Trek's DNA, but as a company who produces RPGs, Wizards of the Coast has gone so far out of their way. Even things like they just released updates to the Drow so that they're not evil anymore.
Yes.
I mean, this is like I'm going to go on the record here, and so watch, and I'll be wrong. But in 2024, this really, this kind of sent up a little bit of a red flag for me because of our shared age. In 2024, like us, D&D will be 50 years old. I know, well said. I really think that the 5e enhanced or expanded or 6e, whatever they do, I really think they're going to double down on breaking down species stereotypes and really just exploding access, conceptual and personal access. And that's in a way, that's what therapy is about, right? It should be a safe, predictable, consistent place where you talk and you grow. Even if you don't gain a whole lot of insight, you are simply heard. And in being heard, there's value and there's healing.
And it's so Jason and I played for the first time
So much fun
in a while. And it was a lot of fun. I, as a DM, I made some corrections based off of all the knowledge I've garnered in the 20, almost 30 episodes we've had.
And my character didn't die. So really,
no, yeah, but we actually figured out how to handle ability modifiers this time. So, and I actually had you this time around were able to run. I actually had you check something beyond perception because that was really the only thing we were checking.
No, totally guilty. Totally guilty, but you did really switch it up.
Yeah.
My character was very validated.
I think, I go out and again, I'm using a social media platform and I'm not doing it because it's the only. I'm just using it because it really opened the door to things that as middle-aged men, you don't normally see. People
Right.
are comfortable even in their descriptors of themselves, signifying and identifying who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Based off of gender, based off of orientation, based off of anything. This is why I've mentioned in prior episodes, it is such an inclusive, friendly group of people who aren't afraid. And and I told Jason I wasn't going to type, but I did. I used my phone this time, so you didn't hear it.
What did you order?
Nothing. But why I thought about this is it reminded me is Kickstarter, ironically, Evil Hat Productions, the people that make Fate.
Yep, awesome.
I
know where you're going.
You know where I'm going.
Accessibility toolkit.
Yeah. Nope.
Oh.
You don't. No.
No.
Read
a bit, brother.
There is an RPG coming out called Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yes,
I've seen it.
And
the
it
source
blew past its Kickstarter goals. And again, I'm middle-aged white guy, so a lot of these things I'm learning every day from, but just the fact that we are seeing a game that even has that word, I hate to say it that way, but even has that word in it these days, and it blows by Kickstarter goals, is phenomenal. And it actually makes me proud to see that. And I'm proud for the community that's allowed that to for that to become okay.
Yeah.
And I think RPGs allow, I think Shelley Mazzanoble talked about this in terms of her character being someone who is different than herself in real life. And I'm going to have to go back and listen to that again. If you haven't listened to that episode, please do. But she uses this character as an extension of herself, which allows herself to play someone. I think she was talking about her character being intoxicated. Go ahead.
I was thinking about exactly this thing. I think it was yesterday in the car, of how I want to play more. Because we played and it got me all jazzed. How I want to play more, and how whenever I play, my characters are always either a fighter or a bounty hunter or a smuggler. Why? And like, I remember when I started, you were surprised. It's like, you're not going to be a wizard?
Yes.
And it's like, I would love to be a wizard, just like I would love to be a Jedi. I've done that in the past, the Jedi, but this is an opportunity to express myself, to play a side of me that's not me, that is totally antithetical to how I behave, right? It's very It's very freeing. It's very liberating, right? At least in D&D, not so much the others, but in D&D, for example, I like playing a fighter. There are things about, there are things that are similar to me, but I like playing a fighter and kicking posterior because that is so not me in real life.
Well, yeah, I mean, I go back to the days of gaming online back with Valve and Half-Life and all that. You'd always use the terminology. I see this terminology still in gaming. Are you the tank? Are you the healer? Are you the oh god, I just had the terms in my head too. The tank, the healer.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, we've talked about this.
I never thought you'd play something besides a healer or a healer class in whatever game we were playing. Right. So this allows us, I think, an extension allows us to perhaps, you could smack me down on this, seriously. Does it allow us in some cases to play the way we really want to be, but feel shunned, or would be afraid of being shunned if we acted that way?
Right.
Allow us to be someone who we normally wouldn't be. And again, we're all doing that, but it's a way of
expressing ourselves, and it's a healthy way of expressing ourselves in a way we wouldn't normally. Before we start to kind of wrap and walk over to the jam corner, I want to just cite some research for a moment,
please.
On topic. This is not new research. This has been known for decades. It's very well established. 51% of people over the lifespan will experience at least one diagnosable psychological disorder. Let me say that again. Slightly more than half of everybody over the lifespan, right, from womb to tomb, as it were, will at least once for a period of time experience a truly diagnosable disorder. Most will be depression and or anxiety. There are lots of other things, but most will be. In fact, probably around a third of everybody just in normal everyday life will experience a clinical depression or anxiety, right? Most of those, in fact, will not be diagnosed or treated, but they'll experience it. Our point, everybody, is that just like it is unremarkable to break your arm, because pretty much everybody does it, it is unremarkable to sometimes be anxious or depressed because everybody does it. It still hurts, just like the broken arm. But there are interventions and treatments and communities to help you heal, just like the broken arm. The norm is to sometimes be broken, and the norm is to sometimes hurt. And we're just very impressed with what that episode did and what they're doing right now with Dr. Culber and the exemplary acting of Mary Wiseman and Wilson Cruz. And we really wanted to talk about it because, like Brad said, when we saw literally the overwhelming response, the overwhelming sense of recognition, and what we are interpreting as just being heard, right, and being felt, it's like, yeah, this is the time to talk about it because people hurt. The world is hurting right now, even more than normal, courtesy of this pandemic. And tabletop role-playing games can be, for many, a salve. They can be anything from a bandage to a medicine. Anything that's adaptive that helps you feel better is worth looking at. And how cool is it that some of our favorite games and our favorite games with friends in community can offer us that.
Yeah, and I'll just two tidbits and then we can
close us out here.
Yeah. This sounds contrived, and I don't mean this because none of you know me. But for all of you that post out there and talk about what hurts and talk about who you are and not be afraid of it, whatever identity, whatever you want your identity to be, or whatever you want what your identity is. And I say this and I say this with a little bit of emotion, I'm proud of each and every one of you for doing it,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a hard thing. I have not had to experience that. It's a hard thing to do. And I only know that from the experiences others have had telling me. One. Two, it will be interesting to see over time how this episode with Tilly and Dr. Culber and Book play out. Because maybe I'm over dramatizing it, but I think that is I think that's an inflection point episode in many ways, because it
I think
wasn't about, and I there's a half joke with this. It wasn't about pew pew pew. It was about your own mental health and your health period. And so I would hope that it starts to, or it'll resonate with people, and it starts a conversation. And thank you to the writers and the actors for doing that, because even like every episode is probably, or not probably, is tough to film. You have to go through a lot. I have to imagine it's difficult to act out therapeutic issues, because there's an embarrassment about it that's permeated society that's only starting to go away. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have talked about the fact. Jason knows my history and all that. I've been in therapy. I'm not afraid to say that now. But 5 years ago, there was more of a stigma. I know arenas, I've talked with Jason about it, I'm not going to get into them. I know arenas in our country, in areas where mentioning that will stigmatize you to a point where you might even lose your career. There are still some small areas that still adhere to a very backwards approach, so, but moving on to, let's make things a little more light by talking about and moving over to the GM's corner. I don't normally introduce the GM's corner, so this is a little weird for me. So we have a nice little schedule. Brad opens up, Jason mentions the corner, and then Jason wraps it up. So since I've introduced it, and you're typing this time and not me, by the way.
Sorry, my computer is all of a sudden acting up and I'm trying to shut it down. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to just get out of this and tell it to stop. Sorry.
Okay. I thought it was funny because Jason
I've been giving you a hard time.
Typing.
And then Microsoft, well, clearly, frustration courtesy of Microsoft. It's telling me to do something and it's dinging. I'm sure you could all hear it. I don't know.
I couldn't hear the dinging.
Oh,
so
well, then I should have just let it be. I was sure you could all hear the ding.
No. So,
okay.
So along the lines of hearing things that nobody else does, what have you been reading or looking at this week that has caught your attention or is worth mention?
And
I think there might be a little overlap here potentially.
Yeah, a bunch of things. Very briefly, I've been reading. I just started reading the fourth book in Becky Chambers's Wayfarer series. I've mentioned this before. I mentioned her before. I mean, it's just, she's such a good writer. I'm so enjoying it. I have as you all know, the Genesis expanded player's guide scheduled to arrive Friday. I'm really curious about that. And I'm trying to think. I did recently, just a few days ago, I didn't send you a picture of it, but I reorganized my RPG shelves, basically to better accommodate upcoming books.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I've run out of room, so but that's not going to stop me.
No.
Jason and I, neither of us have ever really thought about or had much of an interest in playing anything in modern day. It's either the far past, the far future, or the far fetched. But Green Ronin's Modern Age, based off of their age system, advanced gaming engine. Fantasy Age, Dragon Age. I did because we both, ironically, on the same day, got a Amazon gift card.
Right.
And so we used that to purchase. So I picked up a couple things from Green Ronin related to Modern Age. And there's a hook to that we'll talk about later in another episode. But
subtle, smooth.
Yeah, between that, looking at the Genesis stuff, I really got into this and digging into the Foundry, which is, for those of you who don't know, that's the creative area where individuals like us or third-party groups share and provide information about projects they've completed, projects they've worked on, using the Genesis narrative system.
Yeah.
I've been out there reading. And then the last one was, I mentioned this in a prior episode, I think, if I didn't, never been interested in the horror genre, the Lovecraft era and all that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily fully aware, I will claim true ignorance on this, that there might be a little bit of misogyny and racism in Lovecraft's past. But I did play some solo Call of Cthulhu, and it's a fun little solo thing for me to do when I need a break. I've taken, like, I don't normally take a lunch break. I work straight through. Well, one day I just sat over and took a half hour and played.
Good for you.
I don't think it's necessarily anything you and I will play. But Genesis, I talked about the expanded player's guide and some of the stuff that it'll help us do with our Trek port.
Yep.
I've really spent most of my time in Genesis, and then obviously D&D to prepare for the next couple gaming sessions or episodes. So it's been a busy and good week when it comes to gaming. And then both of you, we're learners. We're, Jason's an educator. I'm in a world that supplies software to education. Most of my closest friends are involved in education. So it fascinates me so a lot of times Jason and I'll even talk about it. And so I've been doing some self-education, and interestingly enough, I make myself sound extraordinarily geriatric by saying this. I'm sorry, but I learn a lot by just reading Twitter in this genre, in this area of the Twitterverse. There's areas of the Twitterverse where you're not going to not only learn nothing, but it actually, you could be dumber for having read it. I hate to say that.
Yeah, there's a, shall we say, range?
Yeah. The area that we are in, though, what we just talked about, there is so much to learn from all of you. So I do spend time reading in there and learning. So.
Yeah, ditto. All right. Well, thank you as always so much for being with us and joining us on this topic. We'd love to hear what you think. We will definitely see you, talk with you next week. In the interim, be well, stay well, and
follow us at Dice and Mind. Check us out, and you can talk with us, DM us at Dice and Mind on Twitter.
Well done. We would love it. Be well, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye.